Hello peeps, welcome back to Big Deck Player with me, Matt Sparks. On this week's video we shall be taking a look at a Mage deck that's a little different from what I'm used to playing. This is called Frescha's Fish Freeze. So this is the deck. This is the deck that we are taking a look at. This is a bit of an unusual one. It's not one that I would normally kind of play, but it looked quite interesting when I saw it on Hearthstone. So let's just take a look at it then. We've got two Frostbolts, which is fairly standard for most Mage decks and is not anything particularly unusual. And then we move into stuff, it gets a little bit weird. Doomsayers. We have two Doomsayers. Now, there used to be a deck that was similar to this, that involved Alexstrasza and Pyroblast, and I'm sure most people have probably come up against that at some point in the past. And this is a very similar sort of deck to that, but it doesn't have Pyroblast and it doesn't have Alexstrasza, which confused me, because you kind of think that that's what the sort of deck you're going to be coming up against when you're playing this, and it's not. So yeah, so there's two Doomsayers, which is usually comboed nicely with the Frost Nova, so that prevents any of your enemy minions from attacking, which means hopefully your Doomsayer can then kill all those minions at the start of your next turn. Problem is, Doomsayer usually gets shut down pretty fast, because obviously your opponent doesn't want to lose all his minions. So it gets silenced, it gets polymorphed, it gets hexed, sometimes it gets fireballed. You know, it's got 7 health, so it should be okay. But there was always a way of shutting it down. And obviously, if it does happen and you do end up with it getting silenced, it's pretty useless. Unfortunately, it just takes up room on the board. So next we have two Explosive Sheep, which is pretty cool. Now, I would suggest mulliganing for these, if mulliganing is a word. You should mulligan for these. That sounds more like it, doesn't it? These are really good early game, and as you're a mage, you can ping them yourself, causing their death rattle, which is pretty cool. These are also really nice against other mages that might be running Mirror Entity, because obviously if you put this down in their Mirror Entity procs, you're going to kill it off anyway, so it makes no difference. Also nice against hunters that are running secrets, because even if they've got something out on the board and they're using an explosive trap, you can just run this into the hunter and it will explode and kill, hopefully kill whatever it is that they've got on their board as well. Also, misdirection, it's not going to do too much damage. Snipe is pretty cool if they have something on the board as well, because that will kill the Explosive Sheep and then do 2 damage to everything that they've got. So it's a nice counter to Hunter Secrets as well. Talking of secrets, we have 2 of our own in the form of Duplicate. Now, you have to be very careful when using Duplicate, because there are some things in this deck that you will want duplicated, but you also have to make sure that you don't have too many cards in your hand. One of the problems I've found with this deck is that sometimes I've just got too many cards and I don't really have a way of playing them. I mean, what's the use of having 2 Frost Novas in your hand if your opponent doesn't have any minions on the board? So be very careful when you're playing Duplicate, because there is a bit of milling in this deck. So you don't want to end up milling yourself, as if you can avoid it. As I mentioned earlier, we've got 2 Frost Novas. We have 1 Big Game Hunter, which is pretty cool for getting rid of something big. You may decide to use Duplicate for Big Game Hunter if you're up against maybe a Handlock, who might be playing lots of giants. You might want more than 1 Big Game Hunter, which is pretty cool. We have 2 Cold Light Oracles, so this is the milling I was telling you about. So again, this is when you want to be careful what you're duplicating, because most of the stuff in this deck is sort of 3 and maybe 4 mana. So early game, you're not going to be able to dump your hand very quickly. In fact, you're probably not going to be able to dump your hand very quickly at all throughout most of the game. So you have to be very careful when you play these not to end up burning your own cards, because that would be bad. Try and play this when you're at 6 and they're at 8, so that, you know, they burn their cards but you just fill up your hand. You know, stuff like that. Maybe duplicating the Cold Light Oracle, depends on how the game's going. Depends on how lucky your draw's been. But I would probably suggest not doing that. 2 Death Lords. Now this is something I would duplicate. I know it means that your opponent gets a minion on the board from their deck for free, but taking cards out of their deck and putting them into play means that when you do play your Cold Light Oracle, there's a higher chance of getting to fatigue. And I have won a lot of games through fatigue with this deck, more than I have with some other decks that I've tried to use with milling tactics on. So Death Lords are pretty cool. Plus, there's not a guarantee that they're going to get something good. They might end up getting something a bit rubbish, which is fine. And there's so much AoE and control in this deck that it shouldn't be too much of a problem. We have 1 Earthen Ring Farseer for a little bit of healing. Now this is pretty useful to combo with your Death Lord, actually. Sometimes, because your Death Lord's got so much health, sometimes you just want to top him up so that he can hit something else. Earthen Ring Farseer allows you to do that. Also, Earthen Ring Farseer is quite nice just to give yourself a little top up. It's only 3 health, but it might be enough to keep you going for a little while. 2 Cone of Cold, again, and this is great for just freezing stuff in place. Maybe you've got a big play coming up the next turn. Maybe you don't have a Frost Nova and you've got a Doomsayer that you want to use. Cone of Cold is good for that, so that's why it's there. Plus, anything's got 1 or 2 health, Cone of Cold will help you pick them off. So that's pretty cool too. We have 2 Echo of Medivh. Now, I haven't had a huge amount of use out of Echo of Medivh in this deck. Mainly because you've got 2 duplicates and you've got 2 Cold Light Oracles. You don't really have a lot of room in your hand to start copying stuff. So you might not find that this is actually that useful. In my experience so far, it's not been. And so, as a result, you might want to put in maybe like an Ice Block secret, or maybe Alexstrasza. But yeah, I've not found that I've had huge amounts of use for this just yet. But because it's in the deck list on Hearthstone, I'm putting it in the deck. We have 2 Polymorph. This is also very good if you're coming against stuff that's big or might get a bit out of control with buffs and stuff. Having Polymorphs in your hand is pretty useful because sometimes big stuff happens and you don't have an awful lot of way of getting rid of something, just one individual thing. This is more about AoE clearance. 2 Antique Healbots. These are something I would consider duplicating or possibly getting in on the Echo of Medivh, just because 8 health is huge. So there's potential 16 health with the 2 that you have in the deck, but if you can duplicate them, then that's going to keep you going for even longer. It's a shame that they're 5 mana, but I think if they'd been any less than 5 mana, they might be a bit overpowered. We have 2 Sludge Belchers, because Sludge Belchers are pretty awesome, and a slightly later game taunt to the Death Lords. So you've got plenty of taunt, especially if you can get a duplicate or an Echo of Medivh off on these guys. Very useful indeed. And then we have AoE clearance, or control in this case with Blizzard, and Flame Strike. So I don't really need to talk to you about Blizzard or Flame Strike, it's fairly self-explanatory. So that's the deck. I quite like it. It's very different to what I usually play. I would suggest that you mulligan for Explosive Sheep and the Death Lords. Death Lords are pretty good unless you're coming up against a priest. Death Lords are usually pretty good and will last quite a long time just because of their huge health pool early game. Later game, maybe not so much, but early game they're really good. So that's what I would suggest you mulligan for at the start. Explosive Sheep are nice because if you're playing against a rush aggro deck, they can usually clear most of that off for you, so that's pretty cool. So that's the deck. That is Frescha's Fish Freeze. It's a bit of a tongue twister. I quite like it, and I'm having a bit of fun with it. I'm not necessarily winning every single match, but I am having fun with it. So I would suggest that you try it out. Let me know how you get on. If you make any videos, feel free to link them to me on Twitter, and I shall be sure to check them out. Again, as per usual, there is a link in the description which will take you to Hearthstone, so you can check this deck out for yourself. Please head over there and give it a plus rating, because it's a pretty cool deck. And the guy's done a pretty good write-up for it as well, so you should have a little read of that. I shall see you next week for some more Big Deck Playa. Thanks very much for watching. Bye-bye.